Over the years, one of the most common questions I hear in grief counseling is, shouldn't I be over this by now? What most people aren't told is how grief actually changes over time. And if you've been quietly wondering whether something's wrong with you because some time has passed since your loss and yet you're still experiencing grief symptoms, then this video is for you. I also have some free journaling worksheets that can help you process through some of the issues that I'll be talking about in this video. Keep watching and I'll tell you how to get your free copy. I'm Eddie Trauber, and I'm a licensed marriage and family therapist with over 30 years' experience in helping people deal with issues like grief and loss from a faith-based perspective. One of the things that makes grief difficult is that it doesn't follow schedules or deadlines, and it doesn't disappear simply because enough time has passed. And unfortunately, there's no internal clock that suddenly signals that your heart should be done hurting. Over time, what usually changes first isn't the grief itself, but how it shows up. And this is different for everyone. For some people, the emotional waves may come less often. For others, the intensity of the grief may lessen altogether. And other people may notice that the pain is no longer constant, even if it's really deep when it shows up. But the presence of grief, especially when there's been a deep love involved, could remain for a long time. This doesn't mean that you're stuck, and it doesn't mean that you're doing something wrong. It simply means that your heart is responding to loss in a very human way. Most of us enter into grief carrying expectations that we didn't consciously choose. These expectations can be shaped by our culture, by something someone else said, or it could even be something you saw in a movie. And a lot of times these ideas were absorbed years before you ever experienced the loss. One big expectation that most people share is that if enough time passes, the pain should simply fade away into the background, or at least it should stop surprising me. And when that doesn't happen, fear begins to grow inside. We start asking ourselves questions we never expected to ask. Why am I still feeling this way? Why does this still catch me off guard? Or why does life seem easier for everyone else? And comparison tends to show up pretty quickly in grief. And often we compare our insides to other people's outsides. We notice who seems to be acting normal, who's laughing again, and who appears to be moving forward through life more easily than we are. And we tend to compare those judgments of how they're apparently functioning outwardly to how we feel on the inside, which is a bit of a train wreck at times. What we often overlook is that grief looks different from the inside than it does from the outside. Someone can be working, parenting, showing up socially, and still feel deeply impacted by loss on the inside. You see, functioning doesn't mean that they're healed. Productivity is not the same thing as emotional resolution. Moments of joy don't cancel out moments of sorrow, and moments of sorrow don't mean that joy is no longer allowed. A lot of the confusion and fear that people have related to grief comes from the belief that healing should look like the pain fading away completely. That belief sounds comforting, but it doesn't match how grief actually works. Grief isn't an illness that runs its course and then it ends. It isn't something you get over if you do everything right. Grief is actually a response to love, attachment, and meaning. And there's a correlation to the amount that you love or care for someone and the level and duration of grief that you'll likely experience when you lose them. And because love doesn't simply shut off when we lose someone, grief doesn't shut off either. What usually happens instead is that the grief changes its shape. Early on, grief can feel overwhelming and all consuming. It can take over your thoughts, your body, your sleep, and your sense of safety in the world. A lot of people describe this stage as feeling raw, exposed, or disoriented, like the ground beneath them suddenly shifted in an earthquake. Over time, a lot of people notice that the intensity begins to ease. The emotional grief waves don't tend to crash in on us as often. And during this time, there may be longer stretches where you can breathe more freely, you can focus on your daily routines, and you may even feel more moments of steadiness again. That doesn't mean that the loss matters less. It means that your nervous system is slowly learning how to carry the weight of it. But even years later, something small can bring grief right back to the surface. These triggers can be anything. A certain song comes on the radio, a date on the calendar, a familiar smell, or a holiday. For me, one of those triggers is the sound of a wooden screen door slamming shut. Sounds crazy, right? But my grandmother had a screen door like that went from her kitchen to her back porch. It was wooden and it had a spring that would cause it to close. And a few years ago, when we built our new house, we have a screened in back porch. And sometimes when I go out that door and I hear it close, it takes me back to memories of my grandma's house. And walking in to see her in her hand-sewn apron, cooking some of the most amazing food in the world. When memories are triggered like that, many people panic and think, I thought this was over. I thought I was done with this. That single thought can create more distress than the grief itself. Feeling grief again doesn't mean that you've lost progress. It doesn't erase the healing that's already taken place. It simply means that your heart and your nervous system, they're responding to reminders of something that really mattered deeply to you in the past. And this is one of the most important things to understand about grief. Healing doesn't mean forgetting, and it doesn't mean never feeling pain again. Instead, healing means learning how to carry love and loss together without constantly being overwhelmed by either one of them. For a lot of people, grief becomes something that moves in and out of focus in their lives. Sometimes it sits quietly in the background of your life, and other times it comes forward and it demands your attention. And neither one of those experiences means that you're failing at grief. Now, moving forward, I want you to hang on to this one idea. There's a difference between grief that continues and grief that controls your entire life. Grief can stay present and still allow room for you to function and to connect with other people and have moments of meaning in your life. You can miss someone deeply and still feel moments of laughter. You can feel sorrow and still experience gratitude. Those experiences are not contradictions. And when grief itself begins to feel unrelenting, isolating, or impossible to carry alone, that doesn't mean that you failed. It usually means the weight has become heavier than one person was meant to hold by themselves. Grief was never meant to be carried in isolation. Support, while it's needed, doesn't erase grief. Sharing the load with someone, a close friend, a counselor, a pastor, or even a group like a grief recovery group doesn't take the loss away. What it does is help regulate the intensity. It gives your nervous system somewhere safe to rest so that the pain doesn't stay at a constant peak. Remember, it comes in waves with ups and downs. We definitely don't want it to stay at the peak long term, and support helps with that. Unfortunately, most people hesitate to reach out for support because they believe they should be stronger by now, or that asking for help means that they're falling behind or failing somehow. But you have to realize that grief doesn't respond to willpower. You can't force your way through it. Sure, you can fake it for a short time, but there'll be consequences if you try to do this long term. In fact, strength in grief often looks like allowing yourself to be supported in ways you never expected to need. I want to say this very clearly. There's no correct pace for grief. There's no universal timeline. There's no version of healing that requires you to stop missing or stop remembering or stop being moved by what you lost. Your grief endures because your love endures. And over time, what changes isn't the meaning of the loss, but your capacity to live alongside it. Your life slowly grows around the grief, and it doesn't replace it, and it doesn't erase it. If you've been measuring yourself against timelines or expectations that don't fit your experience, you need to let them go. They were never designed for the complexity of real loss. You're not behind, you're not broken, you're responding to loss in a very human way. Now, if this video resonated with you, like and subscribe and stay with this series. Each week, I'll talk about one way we're impacted by grief and give you some insight to help you feel more grounded, more steady, and less alone as you continue forward. And don't forget to download your free journaling worksheets. The link is in the description below. See you next time.